Hi. Hello from the other side of Los Angeles.
Hello.
Set the scene for people. Where are you right now?
I'm in my office,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to be my bedroom because I'm switching it with my bedroom.
Okay.
My dog is sleeping on the couch next
Mm-hmm.
to me. Her name is Hope. She's snoring.
Mm.
I fed her early so as not to interrupt this, as I
Okay.
know she would,
Right.
because this is Hope's time usually.
What's your favorite thing in that room?
I love over my shoulder, I have a embroidered dumpster fire that a
Uh,
fan I have a community of subscribers, and
mm-hmm.
one of the subscribers and fans of our show Dumpster Fire made that for me recently and sent it, and I love it. The other my favorite thing though is a picture of my grandmother in her wedding dress.
That's tough to joke about because
Yeah.
that's very to the heart and to the soul right there.
But you can joke about the embroidered dumpster fire. It's
Well,
very
it made me think of being in seventh grade and getting way into cross stitch for some reason. And then I thought, you know what we could probably all use right now is a little more sewing. Everybody's been baking. We should probably do a little more sewing.
Yeah, I think there's something really funny about the old timiness with the dumpster fire. That
Right.
just juxtaposition is so perfect for me.
Mm-hmm. It is it does speak to the time that we live in, right? That everybody has gotten old timey. And one of the things that I want to get into a little bit later is thinking about what Twitter has done to your career, to the good, probably, but also to your brain, potentially to the harmful.
Mhm.
But before all of that, I want to ask you what I hope to be a question that'll get you thinking a little bit. What's the thing in talking about your bio? What's the thing you're most proud of? What would you most want to be known for?
Hmm. That's a really good question.
Thank you, Bridget. I thought hard about that one.
I bet you did. I bet you spent days thinking about
Days.
it.
I've been up nights thinking about what would be my first question to Bridget.
You know, honestly, in my bio, I guess, are we talking strictly professionally or just in life?
Well,
Because my
what comes to
proudest thing
mind?
is sobriety. So
Okay.
my gut instinct is getting sober because
Mm-hmm.
everything flows from that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of,
When you say everything flows from that, is that sort of like when some people would say um, everything flows from me finding God or meditation or exercise? Is it that kind of mentality?
I mean, and this ties a lot to my work. I have spent many years um, getting sober was the first step in getting out of my own way, and that's just a big part of my story and journey, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
um I just feel like I kind of still am perpetually at war with myself, and isn't it all just an inside job, this kind of life experience? So, but in terms of getting sober, it I don't think it's an accident that I wanted to be a writer since basically forever, since
Mm-hmm.
I was little. And then I started kind of pursuing that actively at 19, essentially, and had big dreams of being a Maxim columnist when I was 23. I recently found my like thing that I was trying to submit to them, which is
Mm-hmm.
hilarious. And that's back when Maxim was cool for the kids out there. Um, and then I got sober, and it was like a year and a half into sobriety that the rubber kind of met the road. And my work, I started selling things, and I just suddenly started becoming that which I always wanted to become. And I don't think it's a coincidence that I got sober and then that happened. I
Mm-hmm.
think that my drinking and smoking weed and all of the other things always got in my way. Even if I was quote unquote high functioning, there was a certain ceiling that I kept hitting, and it was like a merry-go-round I couldn't really get off. So
Mm-hmm.
when I say everything flows from that, I mean, I also think my work, just that there was more clarity to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would get stoned and be like, this is the most genius thing ever. And then I'd read it the next day, and it was not genius.
Right, right. Well, one thing that comes to mind there is the applicability of this to everyone, even if you are not an alcoholic or have what is classified, I think, easily in the world, right? Like you could say, okay, you have a problem with alcohol. One thing I see a lot with writers, but also with people who maybe are getting in their own way, and I have seen it in myself, is coming up with reasons you can't do things, right?
Mhm.
So like it's not self-sabotage is such a strange word because that I feel like that implies that you did it on purpose.
Mhm.
I think it's sometimes like you know what the right answer is. You know you need to be whatever it is, going to work out and eating better and sleeping better, and that would improve your writing or whatever else it is.
Mhm.
But that people put it kind of in their own way. And I think it is interesting to think about like how hard that is to quantify, right?
Yeah.
Like what is the thing for some people?
Right. And I mean, I think I'm lucky in that it was a pretty easy, like, keystone habit or whatever they call it. It's that many of my other bad habits came from that. I really only smoked cigarettes when I drank. I really only
Mm,
did drugs when I drank. I wasn't hunting for, cocaine when I was sober.
right.
So a lot of those other things, even just, promiscuity, so many things that just ended up getting me in trouble, in my way, and recklessness, and just straight up danger, just being a
Hmm.
danger to my menace to myself and society,
Mm,
came from that. And it just always drama. I mean, here's a good example of how much I decided that I would put all the money that I normally would have spent on weed and booze the first summer that I got sober in a shoe box under my bed, thinking it would be like $600.
hmm.
And it was $7,000. And I'm a girl.
Right. Right. You usually don't have to buy it.
That's just what I was buying, at the liquor. And here's another fun fact, could be a coincidence, but the little mini mart down the street, when I quit drinking, went out of business. They closed. So I'm not saying that it was me, but it was a very strange coincidence. And that was where that $7,000 probably would have gone. So I don't even think I know. It's like why that we were talking before we started recording about how I perpetually had $7 in my bank account. Well,
Hmm.
that's because I spent every single penny of my disposable income on all of these things that I thought. And I had that whole idea in my head of like Jack Kerouac and Hemingway, and I had to be a drinker to be a good writer. There was this
Hmm.
I had romanticized the idea of being an alcoholic and a writer. So I
Yeah.
was really afraid. It took me a while after I quit drinking. I thought I was never going to write again.
Mm.
And I didn't for like 6 months. I really thought like, oh, I guess I'm not a writer. I was just a delusional drunk who thought I wanted to be a writer.
That's something that I noticed when I started going to therapy. The feeling that like I had gotten a reputation for being funny, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my funny came out of anger, right? Um, and I think I thought like if I am better, then I won't be funny anymore. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that kind of funny was not particularly helpful anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is similar to what you're saying about like thinking, well, without drinking, how will I have these experiences, or what do I lean on in order to be like my heroes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I saw
Eh,
there's a comedian I like named Joe Prano who posted something about his dad, and he's like, contrary to most beliefs, my dad was awesome, and he just believed I could do anything, and I'm not a damaged person because of my dad. And there is that romanticization of like the damage that comedians and writers sometimes have.
Right. Yeah. I think it was Seinfeld who is, he's a good example of someone who seems very stable mentally and has done well. And I was reading a whole book basically about this myth that you have to be kind of dysfunctional and out of control to be an artist, and how it hinders so many people. And even when I was in France and standing in Monet's studio, I just really got the sense this guy was a family man. He wanted to get out of Paris. He was pretty much just all about production. He
Hmm.
seemed like a pretty stable guy as far as, especially for the artists of that time that, he was rolling with.
Hmm.
And so I've tried to shift that paradigm in my mind that I can be a healthy, stable, productive member of society and also a successful artist.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a fight for all of us because we maybe don't have without role models.
Hmm.
Our role models are what we saw, right? And
Yeah.
so we see like the glamour of, I actually always take that back to sports. When people find out I played professional sports, they're like, oh my God, the parties must have been awesome. And you're like, not really. By the time you get to the top, everybody's super boring.
Right.
There's like 10 guys who can both play at a high level and go party. So like there's the football player, his name, I don't remember his name. The guy who played at Texas A&M, he's like washed out of football. And people would point to him like he's at parties in Las Vegas all the time. Well, the other guys are at home asleep and eating right and all of these other things. But what you see is the Dennis Rodmans of the,
Right.
and you think
Right.
that's how it is, but they're taking up like 90% of the bandwidth for 10 guys who can actually behave that way. And I think art is very similar.
Yeah, when I wasn't dead at 27, I had a lot of adjusting to do. I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh crap, I'm too old to die young."
Yeah, this isn't going to be fun anymore.
I need to get my shit together. And that was kind of at 28 when I feel like things started changing, or at least I definitely started. I mean, my 20s were just they were crazy, and it's great. I have a lot of great material, but I don't. I'm lucky I lived through them,
Hmm.
so I don't recommend that routine for anyone.
So, in thinking about sobriety, there are obvious like rock bottoms that come along the way. But what I would ask is, have you had any rock bottoms since then where you thought like, oh man, I can't do this writing gig or this internet gig or whatever it is?
Yeah, to right now,
Yeah,
just today,
today.
today. When I'm like, oh, I didn't really want to be talking about the culture wars, and now I'm a slave to them. I've had many rock bottoms, many, many, many in my creative life, and they were dark. I had one when I first moved back to LA when I was about 28, and I will never forget this. My cousin Maggie, who's my producing partner on the Dumpster Fire, also Walk-ins Welcome, our podcast, and has just been my kind of creative partner for years now on my brand, and we made greeting cards together, all these things, and we had no money, and we had gone shopping because we also wrote scripts together. That's why I came to LA. Was I have a mountain of scripts that I've written just sitting in this room right now. And we wanted to get dry erase boards, and we went to Costco and filled up an entire cart of stuff, like $600 worth of stuff, and they rang it all out. And then was about to go bankrupt and had maxed out my cards almost, but I figured I had enough, and I was like, let's let it ride before we have to shut it down.
Hmm.
And again, not advice I would recommend to anyone. And it was declined. And so we just had to like walk humbly back to the car. And I was like, what was I thinking? In that moment, like, why did I need $600? It's that insane creative thing of, I just need something to make me feel like I'm a professional, or I just need to get as many dry erase boards as I can so I
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
I can take all my notes and brainstorm. And I remember being so defeated after that. And I've had a lot of times where I questioned, and I've said this before, maybe not publicly, but I really do believe the difference for people pursuing a creative path, particularly between being delusional and having dreams, is really hard work and just perseverance. A lot of the time, it's just the person who's kind of grinding it out forever.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I didn't give myself a plan B. So I put myself in a position where I really had to make it work, but I was waitressing until 5 years ago. I was
Mhm.
still, and even when I started making money writing, as we all know, freelance journalism isn't exactly the highest paying gig in the world. So I was still going to farms in Southern Oregon to work the season, and I was still hustling. I was still hustling.
Mhm.
So there were times when I remember I was in London because I had gone. It's another long story, but I was there, and my editor left Playboy, and I had had all my eggs in that basket. And suddenly, I was like, "Oh, I might be stuck in London with no job and no money, like in 1 week," because I had no
Mhm.
idea if I even had a gig anymore. So that was another moment where there just have been so many moments where I have had to take responsibility for picking a very hard path.
Mhm.
And I don't think that I don't think anyone, because I don't really like victimhood. So I never really I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. I could have chosen an easier path in life. And I knew choosing this path would be hard. I'm not sure I knew how hard it would be.
Mhm.
So there have been many times, but I think so I've had the ability to reinvent myself or pivot or do something to just, for instance, I went up to a farm, I saved a bunch of money, and then I traveled around the world for 2 years. And I just convinced myself I was going to become a teacher and teach English as a second language and travel forever.
Mm.
My dreams of being a writer haunted me everywhere I went. And it ended up that it was such a strong pull that I ended up coming back, but that I needed to take that trip in order to kind of reinvigorate those dreams
Mhm.
and remind myself. I always say, if you don't chase your dreams, they'll chase you. And it definitely felt like they were hunting me all over the world at a certain point.
Do you remember a feeling of, in talking about pivots and adaptation, when you felt like, oh, there's something here to this, if you'll allow me to summarize, to being a centrist voice largely on social media but also in your writing? Was there and you can correct me if you feel bad about that definition, but was there a time where you like, oh wait, there's something to this?
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
I wish, I was talking to somebody today about just how I'm always called a grifter, and it would be very easy for me to go. If I was a grifter, I would have gone fully onto the left or the right and
Hmm.
just gone all in and started parroting whatever talking points I needed to parrot to just garner the largest audience that I possibly could and gather all the people and accolades. I I had to I unfortunately have the curse of writing was my tool to truth about myself. And
Hmm.
I journaled, and I mean, I started writing when I was in rehab at 19, and it is psycho. I can show you if you want. I have the journal in here. It looks like those journals in Seven.
Mm,
It
yeah.
was like all block writing, no paragraph. I just started writing and never stopped, really, since then.
Hmm.
But it was more of an exercise in saving myself. And sometimes when I don't know how to process something, it's like the weird magic of the fingers, or there's some truth that will come out that it's weird when I'll have a revelation about something while I'm writing, about
Hmm.
whether it's myself or something that I'm trying to work out. And so I would be a horrible writer if I couldn't do it. It's not why I write. I write
Hmm.
to try and be as fearlessly honest as possible. And unfortunately, for all the people who believe that I found this path and sought it out and thought that it would be somewhat lucrative, it's not. And it's way harder being battered by both sides, I think, than just choosing a tribe and having their protection. And it's also like, um, it wasn't a choice. It was just be honest or be a liar.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I just, unfortunately, I'm like, this is just me being me. And mostly I'm just a moron. If anything, I'm kind of publicly growing up and also um just learning. I didn't know anything in
Mhm.
2015 when I stumbled into this. I really knew, and people think that that's some kind of shtick, but no, I knew nothing about anything. I certainly knew nothing about the culture wars.
So what is the support system that keeps you going throughout? You mentioned your cousin, right? The
Hmm.
reason I ask is because I think when we're all finding our way in writing, it's so valuable to find a mini tribe, right? So
Hmm.
not necessarily along any sort of political leanings or anything like that, but just people we can count on who say, I was thinking back the other day to like the importance of when somebody says, hey, where's that book that you promised you were going to send me? Or
Hmm.
that piece you were going to send me? Like that stuff is so valuable.
Hmm.
And so who have there been people that are that for you?
Yeah, there are people who try to be that for me. I mean, there are people, my cousin is a huge support. I guess for me there's a difference. The people who are my cheerleaders when I'm in rock bottom and don't want to go on, or I'm looking, the other thing, this past week, one of my ongoing jokes on Dumpster Fire is like, where are my accolades? But this past week, I really had that literal feeling, and I felt like I was comparing myself to a lot of other people, and I was asking, why aren't I making that amount of money? We are doing, just that kind of bad. It's bad. It's
Hmm.
just a bad. And I just was in that place. So my cousin Maggie is amazing at just keeping me, she'll be like, keep your eyes on your own paper, this, but
Right.
just remind me, like, keep your eyes on your own paper and keep going.
Hmm.
And just keep going, which has been my own mantra forever. And well, that's one of them. The one that's really driven me is, I'm not looking at you dudes, I'm looking past you. So again, keep my eyes on my own paper.
Hmm.
um then there are people who I would call my accountability buddies, and I feel bad for them. Because I'm wildly undisciplined. I'm just,
Hmm.
it's something that I struggle with. And I also have really, this year in particular in quarantine, I had a friend and she like wrote a book in quarantine, and I should have written 5 by now in my life. I mean, when I wrote for Playboy, I basically did write a book over the course of working for them, but I should have had probably 2 books out by now.
Hmm.
And I'm just undisciplined, and part of me thrives on deadlines. And so
Hmm.
if I don't have a deadline, it's extremely, and I'm not getting paid, it's extremely hard for me to sit my butt in the chair sometimes. So
Hmm.
I've had people who have been like, hey, I'll give you X amount if you can have me these chapters, or I'll give you X amount of dollars if you do this many words. And it's like, still just, it's not, I feel they're the most loving. I love those people, but I am the person that I've been answering to, and this was a great piece of advice given to me by one of my mentors, is answer to my future self.
Hmm.
So my boss is Bridget Phetasy in the future, and she's a badass, and she knows what I need to do today to get there, because it's not, clearly it's not, all the other things aren't really enough.
Hmm. So where does that come from? Where does the fact that that future Bridget is waiting for you to do these things, but then you're not doing them? What do you think that is?
Well, I mean, some of it is just resistance, in that sense of the war of art.
Hmm.
There's that fear of, I think, honestly, I have a massive amount of imposter syndrome, because I get to do so much of what I'm doing is just being me.
Hmm.
And it's not like some kind of shtick, and it's not something that's, um, it's not like I said, oh, here's this space and now I'm going to go stand in it. It's all just more intuitive, and also just me being me. Um, so I feel guilty about that, weirdly. There's a sense of like, uh, yeah, it's guilt. I feel guilty and also lazy. So I wrestle with my own laziness because I've I've kind of gotten away with being lazy in a lot of respects in terms of writing. Even
Hmm.
from when I was in high school, I would do everything last minute, night before, always. I decided I was going to be that A student and be disciplined and go talk to the teacher and get notes, write a first draft. I'd never done that. And I did it. I got a B minus. And I got A's on all the stuff I did. I was like, why would I do that then? Like, it
Hmm.
was such a weird, like that okay, I'm doing everything last minute from now on, and I did. And so but I see that there's just that, um I think too, there's some clarity that occurs when I'm under the gun. So my writing might just be when there's that pressure, it forces a bit of clarity that when I'm not under pressure, it isn't there. But it's also in, like, there's a line in 12 step and it says we alcoholics are undisciplined, and I am undisciplined, and that is not something that I'm working on. It. You've been a huge inspiration to me in terms of just creating those habits, those daily habits. And for me, it's doing things that make me really uncomfortable too. Relying on groups of people for support, not always my strength either. So I also think it's just fear of success and just fear of being exposed. Even the other day when I launched this, I write this thing about Twitter and I didn't even think I could sell it. I was like, I wrote it for me. And then I
Hmm.
sent it to my editor and he was like, oh, this is great. Let's use this for your next column. I felt guilty immediately because I was like, that was basically a journal entry. Um,
Are you Catholic by chance?
I am.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
that makes some sense.
I'm very Catholic. So I felt bad immediately. And then I was like, okay. And whatever. I didn't think about it. And then I saw the final, it's in print, it's in the magazine. So I saw it and I read it and I was like, ooh, this was really honest. Because it's
Hmm.
basically a journal entry. And then it came out the other day. And there's something so different about seeing it in the public. And I was like, whoa, I was really honest and forthcoming and revealing in this, in a way, in my room, in my computer alone, that is suddenly terrifying, putting it out in the world.
Hmm.
So I think there's a lot of fear too, especially just writing what I'm trying to write, which is like, how the heck did I end up here? And every story leads back to another story, and it's all very personal.
Hmm. One thing that comes to mind there is that we're all living such public lives because of social media, right? So, people talk about this, especially with teenage girls having to deal with like body image from, the very beginning. Because even if they didn't mean to, their parents are putting pictures of them online.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much effect that has, not just with you, but with anybody who's feeling this pressure to like always be putting something out, right? Like you always need to be creating content, is kind of the imagery we all have in our heads.
Hmm.
Do you have advice for people who are going through that themselves?
Of feeling like they always need to be producing.
Yeah, because I think like it's anything artistic, whether it's writing or sculpting or whatever it is, it just takes time to bake it.
Right.
It takes that
Right.
time of
It
like
does.
making mistakes and thinking about it and
Hmm.
writing it wrong and then fixing it. And I think just now there's this pressure to like get stuff out, and that means that it is difficult to allow for that time.
Yeah. I do. I always tell everyone, focus. I realized that building an audience was power, but I also realized that focusing on that audience is putting the cart before the horse, and that I still needed to create.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote on my 10,000 hours were done on my website, Phetasy.com, and I wrote for nobody. I wrote for 20 people for 10 years and
Mm-hmm.
didn't get paid a dime to write. And so I think there's just that persistence in whatever your craft is. If you want to write if you're writing scripts and find, I also think that you should find whatever social media you're most comfortable or drawn to and focus on building your audience there instead of trying to like build your audience everywhere. If you want to write little sketches, maybe Instagram is better, or TikTok, or whatever is more visual. If
Hmm.
you're a comedy writer, I would say, that's where all the comedians are, and that's where it has helped my joke writing being on Twitter. It makes you sharp, it keeps you up to date on the news, but don't get lost in it, because the danger with all of these platforms is that you end up it's easy to start focusing more on your persona than on your actual craft.
Hmm.
And that's dangerous because now you're outward facing and you're not that. I mean, if you want a recipe for imposter syndrome, that is a very quick one.
Hmm.
Um, I also think that there's a great, if you're a photographer, Instagram it's just figure out where the best networking for your art is and try and build your audience there. But don't make it your primary thing. I went to Twitter because I was basically at a rock bottom in my writing. I came back from traveling around the world. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I went on Twitter in 2013 after I opened an account in 2008 and had no idea how to use it.
Hmm.
And then I just started watching. I found all the comedians and just watched everybody in the space and then started engaging. And I mean, I had 200 followers. I built that audience and I just said, I'm just going to build this one joke, one article. And that's how I found Playboy, that's how I was introduced to that editor. That's how other editors reached out to me. It's really everything has come from that. But I was still writing. The reason that even Playboy was willing to talk to me is because I had posted this thing on Medium that had gone kind of semi-viral. Bill Cosby raped me, kind of, and so I had something to show. And you still just have to work on your, like, always be writing.
Hmm.
Just don't stop writing and just start tweeting. And I've had times in my life where that's been the case, and I felt like an imposter when that was happening.
Let's uh let's shift gears and take a few questions from the
Yeah.
audience. Justin wonders, do you feel that your place of residence makes it easier or harder to write creatively, financially, inspiration, contacts, etc.? Do you think you could do it from anywhere? And then he asks a question that I'm curious about because I don't really understand this. Has AB5 in California affected you? AB5,
Yeah, it
the
has.
brief version of what I would say is that that's a bill that's mostly it was aimed at Uber drivers, I think,
Yeah.
right? To try to like
Rideshare.
get
It
rid
was
of.
basically the unions trying to shut down the ride shares,
Mhm.
and because they were mad at them.
Right. And it had the effect of hitting any sort of freelancer.
I think they're making adjustments to it. They now have two bills, but I'm not sure. It would have affected me, except I had already incorporated. So I recommend, if talk to your tax guy. If you're making enough money, turn yourself into an Inc. or like an S corp is basically what I did.
Hmm.
Because it made me feel like that business aspect of my career is important, and it made me answer to that. There have been a couple of times in this past year even where there were sketchy things that happened with people, and Bridget, wanted to flip out, and I had to answer to my boss, Phetasy Inc., where it's like,
Hmm.
that's not good for the business, what's good for me. So sometimes putting that distance between your art and yourself and the business of your art is good, but also just for tax purposes. If you're making enough money, if you're not making enough money, get a good tax guy who can help you find the loopholes, um, because there are loopholes.
Hmm.
You
So
just need to
what?
find the right
So what
sketches.
about what about LA? How do you feel about LA as a
You know
vessel?
it that's interesting because I write much better when I'm in Joshua Tree. And I get into that every day. I have a whole routine out there that I wish I could somehow replicate here. And just because there's so much more noise and people, the business aspect is here and the podcast and all those things. For comedy, because I also do stand up, I had to be here because that's how I ended up getting, I meet so many people and you just kind of have to be around. So for for that aspect it was great, but I've been focusing more on writing, and if I could get Maggie to move wherever I moved, yeah, I could do this anywhere now. And most of my living is, I was looking at that actually, and this is something I struggle with because for tax reasons and for just looking at how many dollars I actually made boots on the ground in LA versus how many I've made virtually, it doesn't actually make much sense for me to be paying the cost of living that I'm paying here as well as the taxes,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not like I'm making my money here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm giving it one more year.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
giving it one more year, and then we'll see.
yeah.
That was my promise to myself.
This is a question from an anonymous user, and
Okay. I
so
appreciate the anonymity.
yeah. Um, this person writes, as someone with self-destructive tendencies who is sober but spends that sort of money on other addictive things, OnlyFans, cam girls, Twitch personalities, artist Patreons, hell, giving to friends and family, what's your advice on that since I'm already sober? What's the mindset that stemmed from your sobriety that's applicable?
Oh, that's a good one. So, my brain, without any kind of recovery or program, and this is not for everyone, but without that, I will, all of my addictive tendencies will just go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have to address the ism. And that was the most shocking thing to me when I got sober. I thought if I took all the drugs and alcohol away, like my life would be stable, and then come to find out I'm a crazy person. And I was using drugs and alcohol to medicate that. And so if I don't address that, and I mean, it's actually crazy how much stuff somebody here, I saw, they said, what kind of daily habits? It's actually crazy how many things I need to do daily just to feel sane. And I use sane very loosely, not any, and I wake up, I pray, not to like some god in the sky, but just to the creative force, basically, is my higher power. I meditate for 20 minutes every morning. I'm very good about that. I then take my dog for a walk. I have to like move my body. I have to move my body every day. I have to sweat every day. I have to um, I I'm doing my best to write 1,000 words every day, which I'm actually doing.
Nice.
And that's it. I've got to make sure. The thing that I've noticed is also my diet, not my physical diet, but my media diet has the implications for how my day go. I have a curfew of 10 p.m. for my phone now, where I'm tech free after 10, and my computer, unless I'm writing or in some flow. But for the most part, I want things shut down by 10 and no phone in the bedroom. I mean, I've had to create so many guardrails. And I would say that if you are sober and I can't speak for you at all, but if I'm seeing addictive tendencies, even like with Twitter, it means that my spiritual life, if you will, is I'm neglecting it. It's
Mm-hmm.
a sign to me that I'm not paying enough attention to um, the spiritual aspect of my life, whatever that looks like for an individual. Like I'm not writing enough, or I'm not being creative enough. I'm distracting myself.
The thing that jumps out about that to me is your habits are way better than you let on. You made it out to be much worse than it actually is.
But that's honestly from the first time you and I ever sat down, which was years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's that book, Tiny Habits. I've just been trying to add little
Mm-hmm.
habits. It's not that anything that's come naturally. And I've had to like layer things on, that it's not, uh, I'm probably the most disciplined I've ever been in this moment that we're talking, but it has been a 2-year journey to get here.
Yeah, and I think one thing that is important for people to hear from you, but maybe even from me, is I sometimes people will say to me like, "Well, you're so disciplined, that must come naturally to you," and it's very similar to what you're saying, where I know that I will spin out if I don't have the discipline, so therefore I have to rely on it to kind of keep my brain in a reasonable and rational place. So it is like it is almost like an addiction in a way, because you're like, I don't really want to be this way, but I know that
Mhm.
if I don't behave according to these tenets, then
Mhm.
things just don't go well, and you don't want to be around me generally.
No, no. I'm not. I know when I'm dry. Like for me, it kind of presents as being dry. I just get cranky and mean, and I
Hmm.
don't. I'm also, I wake up in the morning, and one of my favorite prayers, there's a line that says, "Relieve me of the bondage of self," and I have that. It's the first thing I see when I open my eyes. It's like on a board above my bed, and that really is, if I can wake up and say, what can I bring to the world instead of what can I get, which is my default, and
Hmm.
thinking about myself all day and being self obsessed, I and shift that perspective immediately. And then try and, I just built in a 1 o'clock workout session with women in my community just because I need accountability, but also I I'm showing up for other people is something that seems to work for me.
Hmm.
It works. Like it's a double, it's cool. They're getting to work out and it's all fun, but it's also a way to, like, by 1 o'clock, I start getting that discipline starts drifting. And so
Hmm.
it's a way to be like, okay, here's another commitment that I have at 1, because my time is very flexible, and that's a very dangerous thing for somebody like me.
Yeah, and I don't. I think a lot of people listening are probably similar, because I think most humans are this way, and that's why we built in certain stopgaps with religion and all of these other things. And I think the fight that we're all going through right now is that a lot of that stuff has crumbled for whatever reason. You could say it's like a neoliberalist's dream to just have commerce run everything, and that will be our savior. But I think that we all probably need to give ourselves a break and realize,
Mhm.
like, we don't have the structures that maybe we once did, and that makes it challenging. I've talked a lot to friends about, like, one of the things that people don't understand about being out on your own in a business sense is that you have to come up with the to-do list, and then you have to do the to-do list,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so right now, I think culturally we're without the to-do list of like, well,
Yeah.
church is at 10 o'clock on Sunday and
Yeah.
everybody's going to be there, so you got to orient your week around that.
And we're locked up and not working in some instances, so it's
Right.
even crazier. And
Hmm.
people are, it's hard to manage your time. I mean, we did a whole video just about working from home because Maggie and I have like the do's and don'ts. And people were like, wow, I really needed to hear that, because Maggie's been working at home for years now, and she's like, put a bra on, like, get up.
Hmm.
Or for men, like, put some pants on. You have to like
Right.
shift. She's like, get out of bed, because it's move locations in your room
Hmm.
and little things like that. And I've really, I feel, you always think about our conversation that we had, the first one, where you were asking me what I felt like I was operating at, and I was like, maybe a 2, and that was not a lie. I mean, I am, out of 10, probably. I think I've maybe upped it to like 5
All right.
in
Let's.
terms of what I feel like I'm capable of. And this is something that I tell people too, and this is a trick that someone kind of gave me who's in therapy, is how are, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's just say, how badly do you want X?
Hmm.
And now, how hard do you feel like you're working to getting to X? Be honest, on a scale of 1 to 10. My brain is, how do I get from 2 to 10? And then
Hmm.
I immediately shut down. But really, the right thing is, okay, now what do you need to do to go from a 2 to a 3? And that's
Hmm.
how I've built these little, like, I keep layering. Okay, now what can I add once I've
Hmm.
got that plate spinning? Um, but it's not easy. I
No.
I freaking hate it sometimes.
Yeah, and I do think that in some ways goes back to how inundated we all are with what we think to be success stories.
Yeah.
In that it's difficult when you are like, well, that person has whatever the thing is, the book deal or the following or whatever it might be. It is really difficult to remember what you just said of like, well, I'm not going to be able to get there by the end of the day. All I can get to is 2% of that path. And I don't. And again, I think what's valuable about us even talking about it is just it reminds me of those things, and I hope that it reminds people who are listening that like um, despite your modesty, Bridget, you have made a go of this,
Mm.
and so even the people who are making a go of it don't necessarily know the answers, which could be terrifying, by the way, if you're like, well, shit, if they don't know, who does know? I guess.
Nobody knows but you. And this is, I love this question too that I see. What does help with imposter syndrome? Because that, I think a lot of us struggle with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that exactly what we're talking about helps with imposter syndrome. I feel the most like a fraud when I'm succeeding and being lazy and know that I could be doing more.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that it's not any of my business. Staying in the process, staying in the day, staying in what I can control. I can control the work, not the results of my work. I've got to remember to stand in that tiny little circle. I can control my attitude, not the way people respond to me or my work. I can control my behavior and I can control. There's so little that I can actually control, and letting go of all of those things and just being in the process and knowing if you want to be a writer or whatever that creative urge is, and it's inside of you, and every day you are pushing that ball forward, whether you're writing in your journal or you're bettering yourself, because it is that, like, we are creative forces, all of us. We all, when I was just in Joshua Tree, I was looking at the comment and I'm like, this whole thing is so bananas. The whole life experience, like, it's, when you actually sit down and try and comprehend it, you can't. And you are the only person standing or sitting wherever you are right now. Like, I always say this, we're all individuals and we're all originals hanging in the halls of humanity. There's no one who's ever going to be like you doing what you're doing. And I think it's, if you're pursuing that, there was a moment in some of my darkest moments, I was like, I might have to accept that I'm going to die and maybe people will get me after I'm dead. Like, that might happen. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to be good with that. That I had to be okay with that. When I was waiting tables and just trying to every day show up and be of service instead of resenting that I was waiting tables. Gratitude is a big part of my life. And I would say that if you're lucky enough to be on this podcast or listening to it and being creative, try and stay in that place. It's freaking hard and it takes work, but it is the imposter syndrome. It's also none of my business. Um, like, I also get to shine, and be creative. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of me that wants to kind of minimize everything and hang my head down and be ashamed or guilty. And that's not my place either, really. I don't know. I should stand in it and just be excited.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was a powerful closing statement that I do not want to step on because it was well executed and I thought inspirational.
Thank you.
Bridget, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm
Thank
glad
you for
that
having me.
I'm glad we could turn this back around, um, and
Anytime.
that you could be on my podcast instead of the opposite.
I
Um,
love it.
so where should people pay attention to you?
Okay, so Bridget Phetasy is my Twitter. Anyone who is on here, I know they're your audience.
You can
I will
have them.
No, I will happily follow them on Twitter, and it's probably the best place to try and reach me. And I'm happy to ask any questions you didn't answer, any questions you didn't get to, maybe ask me. And you can find me on Phetasy.com, which is my subscriber site. You can just follow me there for nothing, or you can join. It's only $5 a month, and we have a great community. And then you can find Dumpster Fire on YouTube, and my podcast is Walk-ins Welcome, which Paul has been on twice, and you should listen to those because he's the man, as you
Thank,
know.
thank you for saying that. All right, Bridget, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having
I'll
me.
see you soon.